It's the worst of the CBC for Friday, March 25th, 2022, the show where I watch the CBC so you don't have to. All right, today, very boring, a very big Ukraine fest. So usually I'd say, hey, I don't want to focus on that, the other stories they do. But there's just something that just drove me crazy. And if you've been following me for a while, you would know this would drive me crazy. It's they're finally talking about, getting off Russian oil and gas and needing to supplement it with American gas. And Trudeau's kind of talking about this too. So they talk about that, but then they also talk about the need of getting off natural gas. Now, unless you're saying nuclear energy, which, okay, we can have that conversation, fine. But if you're saying green energy, you're also saying coal and natural gas. Because green energy is a fiction. It's fairy tale land. It's for immature children who are now adults who think that magical thinking can fix the world. I will refer you to the left-wing documentary Planet of the Humans, produced by Michael Moore, where they actually looked at green energy. The first lefties to look at green energy and say, oh, this is totally backed by fossil fuels. This is ridiculous. It's not helping anyone or anything. So he cannot do the Trump thing and be like, okay, energy independence, let's supplement the global supply with American and North American reserves. Trudeau and Biden cannot do that. Instead, they're still going along the magical thinking lines while being reluctantly forced to maybe increase their oil producing capacity. More likely, they'll claim the Iran deal, which will end up helping Russia, will be a way to fight Russia. That's my cynical worldview on the Biden thing. But what really drove me crazy is, the CBC people did their analysis, and this is why it makes it onto the worst of the CBC, is they started doing the analysis here, and they said, they still want to start pushing it and do this in a way that can meet the 2016 Paris agreements. Because, guys, who doesn't love the Paris agreements? What they fail to mention, and this is fake news by omission, pop quiz. There is one country that met the Paris Accord targets from the years 2016 to 2020. If you need any more help figuring out what country it is, since 2020 or 2021, that country no longer meets its Paris Accords commitments. That country is, it's America under Donald Trump, because natural gas is better than coal and oil. And deregulating the natural gas industry was great, because natural gas is a lot cleaner than oil and coal. It is much more efficient. And by much more efficient, right, what is pollution? Pollution is waste, right? Second law of thermodynamics. Guys, even if you listen to Justin Trudeau and Stefan Bilbo, whoever that idiot is, I refuse to ever get his name right. Gilbo, the Dilbo. They do not believe that the second law of thermodynamics is a thing, and this is a big problem in the energy policy of the left and now the red Tories. So the center and the left, the big problem in its energy policies is it doesn't equate or doesn't think the second law of thermodynamics applies if you just believe hard enough and then retweet Greta Thunberg. Meaning there is always a loss of energy when energy is transferred. Okay, this is just, it's going to happen. Natural gas is a lot more efficient, and waste is pollution, right? All the stuff that doesn't get used up in a reaction then turned into energy ends up being pollution or waste. Now, pollution is bad for the environment, and waste is bad for the bottom line of a company that's getting out to you, right? You want more of what you're burning to turn into energy, not emissions. Waste, pollution, all the same thing. Natural gas does this. It is incredibly efficient, right? Which is why when you deregulate natural gas, you met the Paris Accords, and the only way to meet the Paris Accords is to get out of the Paris Accords. So if you want to meet the emission standards of the Paris Agreement, get out of the Paris Agreement and deregulate your own energy industry, and you'll do it. That's what Trump did, and no one could talk about that. So fake news by omission. Which brings us to the story they did not cover today. And yes, I could have gone on the fact, because I did watch a bit yesterday. The Canadian media didn't watch Trudeau get dunked on in the European Parliament and some places in Europe. And yes, all well and good, and high five to everyone who did that. But the more pressing thing is every single narrative about the Freedom Convoy has been proven false. The Toronto Star just doubled down on it today. There were no guns found at the Freedom Convoy. That was fake news. The arson by the purple-haired trucker turns out to not be a trucker. That was fake news. The CBC articles, the foreign funding of the convoy being foreign funded, fake news. Terrorism, fake news. Money laundering, fake news. All of it fake news. And the CBC was actually used as the source cited by the government to invoke the Emergency Act, and they had to retract the claims they had made in the articles they used to invoke the Emergency Act. So, all of that fake news. The fact that they are not covering the fact that they vilified an entire segment of the population during a peaceful protest, and they still call it the occupation of Ottawa. Like, that's just the new NPC talking point. During the occupation of Ottawa, try calling, like, the next time Black Lives Matter does something, it's an occupation, and just watch people's heads explode. That is the biggest fake news of the day by omission. It's the fact that they're not covering what the police chief has actually been saying. And, like, they're doing things like, the national security. And the police said they're covering the fact that, like, during the convoy, security analysts said it could be a threat. Well, it wasn't. This never manifested. Right? So I could say, what was a real big threat? A real big threat, it could have been a terrorist thing, was the Bob Dole campaign in 1996 or 1996. Bob Dole was a big security threat in 1996. He had the threat of killing everyone, but that didn't happen. He didn't murder everyone. So I can be an expert. You can give me all the qualifications you want. I could be international, national, super security expert extraordinaire. And if I say things like, Michael Ignatieff, during his campaign in 2009, there was a real big security threat that he would just, kill everyone in Canada with his karate skills. Now, you could say that, but it didn't manifest. That didn't happen, so it's a moot point. We can look back into the past and say, did the Freedom Convoy was it a security threat? No, well, nothing happened, right? So you can have people saying, it could have happened, but it didn't. And no guns are found, and nothing happened. And now they're throwing on more frivolous charges at Chris Babber and Tamara Litch. This is total state bullying. They're basically piling on charges, more and more frivolous but serious charges, as a means to get them to try and agree to a plea bargain to admit to some very lower charges, so then the media can smear them as, see, the convoy was villainous. And you have to really hope that they have good legal team that will not say, if it's just, you could, if you just admit to this, you get 2 hours of community service, whatever. But if you take that and say you're guilty, they'll then use that and pile on more charges later to all your friends and use your guilty plea on, like, I farted outside the washroom once in a hotel. That's not that serious. But then the CBC will go, guilty, 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 guilty. They were charged with domestic terrorism and they pleaded guilty. Yeah, they pleaded guilty to sneezing, near a water fountain on a sunny day. But guilty, 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 domestic terrorism. So if you plead guilty to anything, the media will use that as a admission of domestic terrorism. The government will use it as an admission of terrorism and go after your friends and family immediately. So that's kind of what they're planning to do because they're evil. So today's Rosemary Barton scale of bias, about an 8 out of 10. A lot of it was just horribly boring, and they covered some sports and the Oscars. The Oscars, shoot me. Which film's going to win the Oscars? The film with the most intersectional categories. So if you have one that's about a black gay guy, that wins. If you have one about, I think they were talking about one, there's like a deaf family versus a gay cowboy story. What's going to win, deaf family, gay cowboy? I don't know. That seems like an equal race. We've already had gay cowboys before. So Dune was a really good movie, so that's not going to win if you're doing your Oscar pool. Other than that, if anyone tries to tell me about the Oscars, blocked and reported for hate speech. Please don't. Good night.